Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're talking about the ultimate keys to the sky. Think back to when you first got your driver's permit, the excitement, the sudden realization of responsibility, the nerves. Now imagine that exact feeling, but instead of merging onto a local highway, you're navigating thousands of feet in the air, completely alone. Earning clearance for a solo cross-country flight is an incredibly high-stakes milestone for a trainee pilot, and the preparation required to get there is absolutely fascinating.
So here's our flight plan for today's Explainer. We'll be covering the ultimate solo test, earning the right, the ground game, surviving the skies, and knowing your limits. Let's dive right in and trace the exact timeline of student pilot experiences.
Part 1. The Ultimate Solo Test. Basic Prerequisites.
Now, what's really interesting about this first step is the sheer amount of time required. Before a student ever attempts to fly cross-country alone, they need a massive amount of foundational experience. We're talking a mandatory minimum of 15 hours of solo flying under their belt in the local area, plus another 5 hours dedicated specifically to instrument flying. You definitely don't just jump into long-distance navigation on day one.
And honestly, it doesn't stop there. On top of those initial solo hours, trainees have to log an additional 8 hours, minimum, of dual cross-country flying. That means flying right alongside a chief flight instructor or a designated deputy. And the kicker? They absolutely must be formally assessed as competent. There is zero room for guesswork or hesitation here.
In fact, before that final cross-country proficiency check is even scheduled, the instructor has to be completely satisfied. They're looking for at least 2 of those dual cross-country flights, sufficient local and instrument flying experience, total familiarity with the local area, and flawless completion of every single point on the cross-country checklist. It is an incredibly exhaustive evaluation.
All right, moving on to Part 2. Earning the Right, which is all about emergency training. We're shifting gears now from academic hurdles to literal survival skills. Instructors vigorously drill these high-stress scenarios. Trainees must execute forced landings during simulated engine failures, as well as power-assisted approaches to land. They also hammer home exactly what to do if you get disoriented. Why? Well, because in the sky, you can't exactly just pull over to the side of the road to ask for directions or check your phone's GPS, right?
As the regulation explicitly puts it, the trainee must be well aware of lost procedures, how to properly use their transponder to alert radar controllers, and have all critical frequencies memorized. Mastering instrument flying practices and controlled airfield communications is an absolute non-negotiable step before you're ever allowed to fly alone.
Part 3. The Ground Game. Preparation and Planning.
Long before that propeller ever starts spinning, a successful solo flight is actually flown right at a desk in the quiet of the pre-flight planning room. It's a strict progression. First, meticulously recording detailed weather info for the destination and alternate airports. Second, filing a formal flight plan. Third, preparing intricate navigation logs by drawing correct tracks and marking map checkpoints. It's really like putting together a giant puzzle.
And then you have to calculate the center of gravity, or C of G. Let me tell you, this isn't just some bureaucratic paperwork. It's a life-saving mathematical requirement. A graphical representation is mandatory to prove the aircraft is physically balanced to fly safely. If your weight distribution is off by just a few inches, the plane simply won't behave the way it needs to.
Next up on the ground checklist is checking NOTAMs. For those who might not know, NOTAM stands for Notices to Air Missions. Basically, it's crucial operational info regarding any sudden restrictions or hazards along your flight route. Maybe a runway is closed for maintenance, or there's a temporary military flight restriction. Checking these is absolutely crucial so you don't blindly fly right into unexpected danger.
To wrap up this whole ground game, the trainees select suitable altitudes and safe routes, keeping terrain in mind. Then comes the resource management, meticulously calculating exactly how much oil and fuel they'll need, plus their mandatory safety reserves. These are literally the absolute final steps before grabbing that headset and stepping out onto the tarmac.
Okay, Part 4. Surviving the Skies. In-flight performance. Once that trainee takes off and they're thousands of feet in the air, the multitasking required is just incredibly intense. This brilliantly illustrates the contrast. You've got routine duties like accurate ETA calculation, map reading, and applying wind drift corrections. But simultaneously, at the drop of a hat, a pilot must be ready for emergency duties, split-second decisions to divert to an alternate aerodrome, dodging sudden bad weather, and handling in-flight emergency comms without panicking. And while managing the physical controls to keep the plane level, there is some intense performance math happening continuously mid-air. The student is constantly calculating their actual ground speed versus planned speed, figuring out the exact top of climb or top of descent, and actively managing the engine by leaning the fuel mixture at altitude. It's a ton of brainpower while flying a machine.
All of this technical jargon, the drift corrections, the mixture leaning, it all really anchors back to one ultimate goal, perfectly captured here. A pilot should have the in-flight situational awareness of all time. They need a mental 3D map of exactly where they are, what the plane is doing, and what's happening in the airspace around them, every single second.
A massive piece of that situational awareness means precisely identifying your position and formally informing air traffic control. By using standard phraseology and navigating with en route VORs and NDBs, the trainee ensures they are a known, predictable entity in the airspace. Establishing that professional communication is exactly what keeps everyone up there safe.
Finally, Part 5, Knowing Your Limits. Strict limitations.
So, the crucial point here is how strictly the aviation industry regulates pilot fatigue. Even with the best training, human beings have boundaries. A trainee pilot's total flight duration in a single day simply cannot exceed an absolute maximum of 6 hours. Whether it's a cross-country, dual, or local combo, 6 hours is the hard stop for the day, period.
On top of that, if a student is scheduled for multiple flights, there is a mandatory minimum 2-hour gap required between 2 consecutive cross-country flights. Why does this matter? Well, because mental fatigue is just as dangerous as an empty fuel tank. This mandatory rest period is a hard boundary designed specifically to prevent exhaustion and keep their decision-making razor-sharp.
Of course, we have to acknowledge the unpredictable reality of the sky. While these limits are extremely strict, flight times might vary slightly due to unexpected, real-world factors, like sudden air traffic control restrictions that force a holding pattern or other genuine circumstantial situations. But the underlying principle? Strict fatigue management is always paramount.
It really puts the whole thing into perspective, doesn't it? The sheer volume of preparation, the nonstop mid-air math, and the strict safety boundaries. So here's a thought to leave you with. Next time you look up and see a small plane flying overhead, ask yourself, are they a student passing the ultimate test? Hopefully this explainer gives you a newfound respect for the rigorous, life-saving preparation that single pilot had to master just to be up there alone. Keep learning, and we'll catch you on the next one.